Hi.
Hey,
Hi,
how you
good
doing?
morning.
Happy Sunday.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome to our book club, Shelf Indulgence. It's nice to have you. We'll start with a really quick picture. Does anybody have the book or did we?
I have
Yay.
it.
Awesome. All right.
Oh, good. Somebody's prepared.
They are. I listened to it.
Okay.
All right, guys. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right. Thank you for being with us and agreeing to come back next year. I'm already excited for
No
She's Gone.
problem. No problem. Thank you.
So I think we have a lot of really good questions. Jesse, do you want to start?
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
I always start, but I'm gonna let Jesse start today.
All right, we're gonna start with my questions right off the bat. So when you were a kid or a young writer, did you look through people's windows like Connor does in the book?
Oh, well, that's a dangerous question to ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I don't know that I ever looked in people's windows. And I wouldn't admit it if I did, but I remember like certainly being a kid, and even now as an adult, just as a curious person, when I drive around a neighborhood and you see houses, and you see them lit up, and you just always wonder, like, what are the lives like inside there, right? What are people doing in their houses? And I have an overactive imagination, so I can imagine a lot of things. But I think sometimes I think the thing that's happening in the book with Connor looking at other people's houses, especially the young couple who he looks at, is to think that other people have easier lives or better lives than we do, right? That I can look at someone else and think, oh, from the outside, their lives look perfect. They're not dealing with the things that I'm dealing with. And I'm sure other people do it to me, right? It's like, oh, that his life must be great or whatever. So I just think that's what I was getting at with his fascination with the young couple was, it's Zach and Sophia, right? His fascination with the young couple is just that they represented everything that he didn't have anymore because he had lost his family and was very alone. And it's easy to look at this young couple with their lives ahead of them and say, oh, they have a great life. Everything's ahead of them, right? And of course, their lives were much more complicated and darker than he realized. So that was the deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh no, go ahead, Brittany.
okay, with your character development, how much do you base on real life? I know you're an English professor, in addition to also being an author. We did some research and some background.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of your character development do you base on people in real life? How do you develop your characters? And then who is your favorite and who was the most challenging for this book?
So it's anything that I write, and this is probably true of most writers. It's a hodgepodge of everything. So there's stuff that I've experienced in real life, or people I know in real life, or characteristics of people who I know in real life. But it's never just one person who becomes a whole character, because people are in real life are much weirder and more complicated than characters are in fiction. So some of the people I know, if I made them characters in a book, you wouldn't believe them. You would think there's no way there's anybody that weird and strange. So it's a hodgepodge of, people I've observed, things I've observed. Clearly in the case of Kill All Your Darlings, because the main character is a creative writing professor and I'm a creative writing professor, those things relating to some aspects of his job, not plagiarizing from students, which I've never done, but the parts about his job and what it's like to be an English professor, those things obviously came directly from my experience or things I observed in my experience. So those things are largely coming straight from my life, but the other stuff is everything, things I've observed, things I've heard about. So you said, who is my favorite character in the book?
Yeah, to develop, and who was the most challenging?
I mean, I really did like Madeline as a character because she had so much going on in her life, that she was this very talented writer. And she also came from she had economic struggles. So for instance, I was not a talented writer when I was a college student, so I wasn't like Madeline in that way, but I could relate to the economic struggles she had because my parents didn't have a lot of money. And so when I went to college as an undergraduate, I always had to worry about money and had to take out student loans. And I had to, like Madeline, I think thinks at one point, will I ever pay off this student loan? I certainly felt that way for a long time. So that's something I experienced, and it's something that a lot of people have experienced, trying to pay off student debt and feeling burdened by student debt. So I thought Madeline was an interesting character in all those ways. Did you say who was the most challenging?
Mhm.
It's always difficult to make the villain interesting and surprising in that way. You've all read the book, right?
Oh yes, you can spoil. We've all finished it.
So like, the quote unquote bad guys in the book are always complicated to do because I don't think anyone is all bad or all good. Even people who murder people, I don't think they're all bad or all good. And in a thriller like this, where I'm trying to trick the reader, right, and convince the reader that this is not the killer, this is not the bad person, right? I have to like give that killer some kind of redeeming quality or some sort of interesting quality so that you don't, as soon as that person walks onto the page, you don't immediately think that's the killer, or that you go back and forth about who the killer might be. So that's always a challenge, I think, is to make the bad person, the villain, complicated enough that readers understand them, but also and complicated enough that readers go back and forth a little bit about who did it.
Did you know who was going to be the killer? Did it change at all as you were writing? I was shocked that it was two people, you know what I'm saying, and who it ended up being. So that was surprising to kill Sophia.
It always, a lot of times it changes for me. I make an outline and I think I know who the killer is, or I think I know how the book's going to end. And then sometimes, I mean, honestly, I don't remember the outline for this. I don't know who I originally thought. But it would be very obvious if it was just the one guy, right?
Yes.
So to make Preston involved at the end, that might have occurred to me as I was writing the book. I don't know. But a lot of times I think I know. And then as I get near the end, I say, well, wouldn't it be more interesting if it was this? Or wouldn't it be more surprising if it was this, right? So that probably changed. Maybe I thought it's Lance, right, is the guy. I might have been fixated on Lance early on and then added Preston as things went along, or realized that Lance is more obvious. And so to have Preston involved makes the story more complicated. That's probably the way it went. And that's usually the way it goes.
Well, Lance was definitely creepy. He gave me those vibes whenever he would like come on the page, you know what I'm saying? His interactions with the students and everything else about him. I'm like, he made me uncomfortable. So he definitely was suspecting. So it was nice that it was not guessable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. You can never trust a Lance, you know?
It's been a long time since I've known a Lance. I don't know how many Lances there are in the world. I went to grade school with a guy named Lance who, as far as I know, has not turned out to be a killer. Or maybe he's a really good one and they haven't caught him yet. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting the way names affect those things, right?
I think we have stories and preconceived notions with names sometimes, you know,
It just-
history.
Yeah, it depends on if you've known someone with that name and then you have bad or good associations with that name.
Do writers get imposter syndrome where they're like, oh no, I've unintentionally plagiarized the concept for a story. What do I do?
I mean, I think, well, that's always a concern, is that you have unintentionally come up with an idea that someone else has already had. There are only so many ideas in the world, right? And so the thing that, and if you think about mysteries or suspense novels, there are only so many reasons why people kill. I mean, why do people kill? It's like love or money is basically it. Like that, it all comes down to love or money, if you think about it. That's why people kill, generally speaking, right? So it's hard to come up with, you're not going to come up with like a really original reason, motivation for somebody to kill somebody. So what makes books interesting to me anyway are the characters, are their specific lives, or the tangled motivations that they might have for what they do. So that's always where a story becomes interesting. So I think it's natural to worry that you've done something that someone else has done, or copied something that someone else has done, just because there's like, how many different reasons do people kill? How many different ways are there to kill people, right? So that happens, sure. I mean, like the plot came out a few months before Kill All Your Darlings, and it has a similar storyline to Kill All Your Darlings. And I hadn't heard of the plot. I didn't know that there was a book that had an academic setting. And now there's been like a little run of books that have academic settings, the whole dark academia thing, like what was the guy who wrote The Silent Patient?
Oh, yep. Alex something.
The second book was in academia. I'm sorry, I forget the name of it. But anyway, so there's been a little run of like books set on college campuses and that. So that happens in writing, is that people go through little runs of like, oh, it seems like everybody's writing about colleges, and everybody's writing about marriages, and everybody's writing about the workplace, and everybody's writing about whatever. And you just kind of get caught up in that.
Sorry about my dog.
Dogs are some of my biggest readers.
Do you think Grindel enjoyed his time with Preston's wife and kids? And does Connor leave Grindel with them as like a consolation of like, hey, sorry that Preston turned out to be terrible, but this dog you've been taking care of, you can stay with you.
Oh, I hope Connor and Grendel were reunited at the end of the book. I think Grendel was well taken care of by Preston's family, because if I remember correctly, it said that he had lived with them originally and one of the kids was allergic, but it was kind of just an excuse on Preston's part, because he felt like Connor was so pathetic and he needed something to care for, right? And so that's why he had the dog, was because it gave him a reason to get up in the morning and walk the dog. I remember my aunt, one of my favorite aunt who died just about a year ago. My uncle died first, and so my aunt was a widow, and she lived in a very remote area. And so she got a dog. And so I would call her to see how she was doing, and she would say, well, she said, some days I only have the dog to talk to. And I said, well, that's nice. And she said, as long as the dog doesn't start talking back, I'm doing okay.
Oh,
so because she was in her 80s, and she was saying like, that as long as I know the dog isn't talking to me, I haven't lost my mind, right? And so I think that's what was going on with Connor and Grendel, that he wanted someone to talk to, and the dog always listened and didn't. If he saw judgment on the dog's face, he was imagining it, like when he would take a drink or not eat right, and he imagined
Grendel was judging him.
Obviously Grendel probably wasn't really judging him.
I loved Grendel. During the first half of the book, my biggest concern was what would happen to Grendel if Connor went to jail. I'm like, we need to keep Connor out of jail because of Grendel.
Bailey texted me and she's like,
nothing bad happened to the dog.
Yeah.
Well, you have to understand something about publishing, is that you can kill anybody in a book. You can kill old people, young people, children, women, men. It doesn't matter, but you cannot kill a dog.
Absolutely not.
The dog is always going to be safe. It's okay. All the people can get wiped out, right? But the dog will always be okay.
Well, Bailey texted me. I was further along in the book when we were reading, and she's like, "Please tell me nothing happens to Grindel." She's like, "I don't know if I could stomach it." And I'm like, I'm like, so far we're good. I'm like, and I didn't think about that, but now I can't stop thinking about that. And I'm like, oh gosh, I hope Grindel's okay. And then at that point, they had just dropped Grindel off with Preston's family, and I was like, okay, it's good. You're good. Don't worry. Like, proceed. Nothing happens to Grindel. We're good.
And Grendel was dropped off with a killer. Who knew?
Yeah, and at that point, I'm like, it's fine. He's with Preston. They're good. And then, of course, Preston's not such a good guy.
Preston's wife and kids were very nice to Grendel, I'm sure. They fed him, watered him, and everything. Yes.
Took care of his needs.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm gonna go back to my questions.
What happens to Zach after all of this? Like, he gets into therapy, right? He's angry. He's sexually assaulting people. His wife gets killed. His best friend kills himself. His best friend killed his wife. Like, there's a lot going on for Zach. He's not doing well in life. What happens to him?
Yeah, Zach, he gets a dog and lives happily ever after. Yeah, Zach had talking about like characters who are difficult to write. I mean, Zach was a red herring that you had to think that maybe he was guilty because he was not a good husband and had all that stuff going on. Yeah, I don't know. I do hope he got into therapy. I do hope maybe he started to meditate. I don't know what happens to him after the book, but yeah, maybe he has a better life going forward. He's young, so there's a possibility that he could learn from his mistakes and be a better person in the future.
What did you see for Connor at the end of the book?
I mean, my hope for him, as it kind of said at the end of the book, was that he had tried to write. He published the one book which seemed more natural to him. The book he stole from Madeline was maybe not something that he would have written himself. And so at the end of the book, when he's lost his job, but he's found another job, and he's starting to write about his life and his experiences, my hope is that he just finds some sort of peace and understanding about what he's been through, and that he starts to live a life that matters to him. Grief is obviously a strange, complicated thing, and there's not a prescription for how to get over it, and there's not a set amount of time before you get over it. It's not like, the chicken pox or the flu or something where you're like, oh, you'll be better in a week, right? There's not any set timeline for that. And Connor hasn't been dealing. He just really has not been dealing. And so my hope is that after the book, he finally starts to deal and starts to move on as best he can. So that's my wish for him, is that he accepts. I mean, he was trying to accept responsibility for the mistakes he made and come clean about that stuff and try to clean up the messes that he made, and then hopefully move forward.
That was my hope. I wanted him to have a happy ending.
Yes.
What research did you do for this book?
I'm trying to think. I mean, writing about young people, because two of the three point of view characters are college students. To me, that's always something that I have to think about, right? Is that because you may be surprised to know this, I'm not a college student anymore. I'm not 20 years old. So part of it is always just knowing that I'm representing young people, appropriately and properly, right? So that's something I think about. Since I teach at a university, I'm surrounded by 20-year-olds all day. So I can always, I just, like, part of it is just absorbing the way they talk, the little bit of slang that I pick up from them, and their concerns, which a lot of that went into both Madeline and Rebecca were just the things I've heard from my students, because I teach here in Kentucky. Kentucky is a poor state, generally speaking. And so I've had students who've dealt with some of the things that Madeline has dealt with, students who have parents who've been incarcerated and parents who are having financial struggles and all that. So a lot of that is just my observation of the students and their concerns. So it's a lot of that, just that kind of observation. I don't know that there was anything, and like the stuff with publishing and the stuff with being a college professor, I've experienced. I didn't have to research it vastly. It's my life. So, so a lot of that just came right out of experience more than anything else.
Was there ever any kind of plagiarism incident at the college you teach at with any other kids, like plagiarizing, final papers?
The question would be how many of them get caught, I guess.
Oh boy.
It doesn't happen very much in creative writing classes, just because I think that creative writing students are so, like, if you sign up for a creative writing class, there's some degree of interest in writing. And so you're weird enough and like self-centered enough that you don't want to plagiarize from somebody else. You know what I mean? So I think it doesn't happen as much in creative writing classes. I have had students plagiarize in creative writing classes. It's been a long time. Maybe they've just gotten good at it. I don't know. But it does happen from time to time that students plagiarize. And it's just mostly it's just because they're lazy, and they don't do their work soon enough, right, or whatever, and they think they can get away with it. But it's not really rampant. Or like I said, maybe they've gotten really good at it and I just can't catch them. It's more likely to happen in a class like composition writing or intro to literature or something like that, where you have people who aren't that interested in writing and aren't that interested in reading books, and they just like, I don't know what to write about, so they go online to we will write your essays for you.com, or they just go to Wikipedia and like copy something because they just like run out of time and they don't know what to say. I try to scare them at the beginning of the semester and say, like, you're better off just getting a C, than like trying to plagiarize and get in. It's like, it's not going to matter that much if you get a C in some 200 level college class when you're 19 years old. It's just not that big a deal. I try to convince them of that, but maybe they don't understand that when they're young. I understand not understanding that when you're young.
Have there been incidences of professors behaving inappropriately with their students?
Oh, now you're getting into now you really want to, yeah. I think that probably happens everywhere. When I was in graduate school, I went to graduate school at two different places. I got my master's degree at one school and my PhD at another school. In my master's program, there was none of that. It never happened. If it happened, it was so well hidden that nobody knew about it. In my PhD program, it's been like 17 years since I finished my PhD. So it's been a while. The culture has changed. But in my PhD program, it was pretty rampant. It was pretty rampant, professors and graduate students. The story I tell real quick is that I took this course on Shakespeare. The professor's dead now, so I can say that. I took a Shakespeare class as a PhD student, and it was a small class of graduate students. And the professor in the class was an older guy, like he was probably 70 then. And I mean, he was a tough, hard-ass professor who just like jumped all over us about anything and ripped our writing to shreds. And if you mispronounced the name of a Shakespearean character, he would jump on you in class for mispronouncing the name. So we were all terrified of the guy, and we were graduate students, so we were worried about our grades all the time. But there was this one woman in the class who like argued back to him and like stood up to him. And I was just like, holy crap, how is she so confident and not intimidated by this guy who we're all scared of? And as the semester went along, I noticed that my fellow student who would argue with the professor, I noticed she was about 30. I noticed she was pregnant because as the semester went along, her belly got bigger and bigger and bigger. So at the end of the semester, like on the last day, he tells all of us, I realized during the course of the semester that he was the father of her child. And that's why she was probably confident standing up to him. They were in a relationship. And so I was in a class where he had he impregnated one of my fellow students. And on like the last day of class, he told us all, he said, you're all getting A's. You're all getting A's. And I walked out of there thinking like, great, I got an A, I feel good. It wasn't as bad as I thought. You know, maybe I'm smarter than I think. And I was walking home and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe we all got A's, so no one complains about the fact that he impregnated one of my fellow students. So how did I get fairly evaluated in this class when maybe the professor just gave us all A's, even though he acted like we were the stupidest people to ever walk the earth, because he wanted to cover up the fact that one of us was carrying his child? So that was pretty rampant in my PhD program. I don't know what it's like now. That guy's dead. I don't know what it's like now. It has happened, notably, it has not happened very much in the English department I teach in now. It did happen one time, and the guy ended up it's a long story short. The guy got fired by the English department and he pitched a fit and it got his job temporarily reinstated, but he's gone. And that was the only time I ever knew of it happening in the department I teach in now. And that was like happening right. I just saw the movie She Said last night about the New York Times investigating Harvey Weinstein. That was all, this particular incident I'm talking about was blowing up right in the fall that the Me Too movement was like happening, like the Harvey Weinstein thing was happening and all that was happening. So I don't know if that has affected the culture at the university. I really only know what goes on in my department. And I don't even know that much of what goes on in my department because it's a big department and I don't like talk to that many people. But it did happen in our department a few years ago. So it happens. And I've seen it happen, and I've seen the effect on people, on the students who feel, like, their lives have been turned upside down. It affects the whole. I'm not trying to diminish what happens to that individual, but it has a ripple effect to everybody because everybody feels like they can't trust. They can't trust the grades. They can't trust someone to be a responsible mentor, caretaker of young people. It turns everything upside down in a way that is not good.
Mhm.
And I know this is being recorded, so
It is. It's for our YouTube, but it's also okay. I was like, but it's also for, but if we do, there have been certain people that have joined us that have said things that are like, please don't repeat. And so we don't post
I don't
it.
care.
Just so you know, I was like Grady, when he joined us this last time, he told us some personal things, which was lovely. And so that one did not get posted because
I was just kidding. I didn't name any names, but I've seen it happen. Like I said, I've seen it happen. And it's, it's not good. It's a terrible thing for everybody involved, especially for the person who is getting harassed, victimized, whatever, by someone who has power over them, power grades and all that. And so it's not good.
Well, I think you tackled that very well in the book where you were talking about how certain individuals felt, like responsible to work with Lance, for instance, and the power dynamics, the struggles. like with Madeline, and her knee being touched and the uncomfortableness. Like, I think you did a really good job of like letting us feel that.
Mhm.
And I will probably sound really naive when I say this, so you can label me as naive. When it happened in my department, I thought everyone would agree that this person needed to go. And I was shocked the way that the feeling split along gender lines, and that every woman in the department was like, get rid of him. And that except for, and I'm happy to put myself in this category, except for a couple of men, there were a lot of men who made excuses. And maybe, again, maybe I'm naive, maybe I just don't know enough jerks, but I was shocked at the way it split along gender lines, and that the men who were willing to try to make an excuse for this guy. And yeah, anyway, I'm still shocked by it. I'm still shocked by it. And I should know, because I just saw that movie, She Said, which shows the same thing, you know, the enablers and the people who cover that stuff up.
Well, and it's like Preston, you're a politician, basically. He was
Right.
very good at smoothing things over, covering things up, making it all
Saying
look
the
like
right
it was
thing.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and the people who would say things, the men who would say things like, oh, you know, give him a second chance, he's a good guy, it's this, it's that, you know. And it's like, yeah, anyway. So I've experienced that, and certainly a lot of that went into the book. That there are always people who are willing to, people who out of one side of their mouths will say, oh, they're strong believers in equality, and they you know, they're feminists and they want women to be treated well, and they believe in equality for women, and a woman can do anything a man can do. But then when this issue is presented to them, that all goes out the window, and it's boys will be boys, and I'm on the boy team, right? And it's shocking to see people do that. Like I said, I feel naive, even though I should understand that, but I feel naive when I see that, because I think, really, you're still like, it's like we're on the playground in the 8th grade, and it's like, you know, the boys were over here and the girls were over here, and it's like who, why? That's a human rights issue, that's a civil rights issue, it's not a like boy girl issue. But anyway, you understand. I've said what I've said about that, but that all went into the book clearly.
I think you did a good job with it.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
It was a sensitive topic, but I think you handled it very well.
It is, and I understand that I'm writing about it, that as a man, I have not experienced that. Like my experience, say, in graduate school, when I wasn't sure if I was being evaluated fairly because of the relationship between the professor and another student. And there was other stuff in graduate school where like people would get certain advantages, and you would find out it was either because the professor was sleeping with the student or the professor wanted to sleep with the student. And so since these were straight men doing all this, they weren't interested in sleeping with me, right? So as a man, I experienced that only, you know, peripherally. I certainly have known many women who have been sexually harassed and have experienced that. So it is a little tricky to write about it from the perspective of a man who hasn't experienced that in the same way that a woman who has been sexually harassed would have experienced it. But I can only write about it the way I've seen it. You know, I'm just telling it from that point of view. So anyway, it is tricky in that way.
I could see how that could be challenging, but I do, like I said, think you handled it very diplomatically.
What do you think ever happened to Preston's wife and kids? I mean, because they walk in and seeing him, you know, getting arrested.
Mm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm assuming with kids, that would probably have a pretty dramatic effect on them.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly be traumatic to learn that your father participated in all of this. and is not the person he had been pretending to be, and is going to get hauled off to jail and lose his job and everything, right? So their lives are going to be completely turned upside down. I mean, I think that my suspicion about human nature is that when you find out something awful about someone, you may have been in denial about it and you may not have been seeing it. We've all had the experience of someone reveals their true selves to you, and you feel like it's a shock. I never saw that. I can't believe it. I never thought that person would do that. But if you look back, honestly, you see like, oh yeah, they have really been telling me who they were the whole time. And I've been trying to make allowances for them, or I've been ignoring certain things, right? I mean, you think about that, like it happens in romantic relationships a lot, where like, you know, somebody cheats on you, or somebody does something out of the blue, and you're like, I didn't see that coming. And then you look back and you're like, oh, there was this, and there was this, and there was this, right? I would imagine that's probably what would happen with Preston's family, you know, that they would look back and say like, there have been signs along the way that wouldn't diminish the trauma, especially for the children who are not going to have a father in their home going forward and all that, right? So I imagine it's not going to be pretty for them. This is much heavier than I thought the Sunday morning book.
Sunday, David.
This is the hard-hitting book club.
We ask the real questions. We do the work. We read the book.
No,
we ask
that's good.
the questions.
That's good. That's good. It's frustrating to me, if you'll allow me to complain as a writer. You know, sometimes people will write reviews. I don't mean people on Goodreads. I mean like actual reviewers will write reviews of the book, and they won't mention, like reviews of Kill All Your Darlings, that didn't mention the sexual harassment component of the story, which I thought was a big issue in the story. And I
think it was worth discussing.
And they won't mention it, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, it's a thriller and it does this and you have to guess the killer. And it's like, but yes, there's that, but there's like other stuff in the book. So it's nice to see somebody mention the stuff that I thought was important in the book, perhaps more important than who the killer was. I mean, they're inextricably linked, that issue and then who ends up being the killer. Those things are linked, right? So
do you read reviews? Oh, go ahead, Heather.
Sorry. Yeah, I felt sorry for Preston's wife and kids at the end of the book.
Yeah. Even the shittiest people have people close to them. You know, the shittiest people have friends usually. And I mean, some really shitty people don't, but like they have families, and you know, those families suffer the consequences for their behavior, which again is unfortunate, but it does happen.
So do you read reviews? How much of that? I know some authors do, some authors don't. Some will just do it the first day so they don't drive themselves crazy.
Yeah, I mean, inevitably, I do end up reading the big reviews that come out, like from Publishers Weekly and places like that, because the publisher sends them to us. They're like, hey, the Publishers Weekly review is out, and it's like it's there in your email box. Now, I could tell them, stop sending me that shit. But I'm a little curious about that. I've stopped. I used to look at, you know, we have access to sales numbers, and I used to look at the sales numbers, and I used to look at Goodreads reviews and Amazon rankings. I used to look at that stuff, and I have stopped doing that just because it's kind of a no-win scenario, right? If I have a book and it's got like 99 5-star reviews, and then one person writes a 1-star review, we remember the 1-star review. That's what stands out to us, right? And sometimes it's a 1-star review because, you know, they got a book that had a rip in the page, and they're like, 1 star, the page, you know, page 52 has a rip in it. And it's like, you know, I am not in the Amazon warehouse packing stuff, believe it or not. Or like they complain about the price, and it's like, I don't set the price. I'm not involved with that part of the business. So I have stopped paying a lot of attention to that stuff just because it's a lot of information. It can be frustrating. It's not, even the big professional reviews that I do read, I respect the people who do that, even as I complain about them. I respect the people who do that, and I respect the role that those things play in the whole business of doing things, but it's not the most important thing to me. Honestly, I would rather have just a reader say, I enjoyed your book. I couldn't put your book down. I would rather, it's more important to me that someone just bought the book and gave it a chance, even if they don't like the book. That person out there somewhere in Kansas or Idaho or wherever who took the time to buy the book and read it and gave it a chance, that means more to me that someone would do that. And it's still kind of shocking and wonderful that people will actually buy a book that I wrote. That's kind of an amazing thing. So I would rather, I put more stock in that, just having somebody say like, I bought your book, I read your book, right? Than what a reviewer says. And it's much more about, we can all drive ourselves out of our minds if we worry too much about what other people think about anything in life. And so as a writer, I have to just enjoy the things I have control over, which are writing the book, coming up with the idea. You know, if I don't enjoy that and I let myself, as I have in the past, let myself lose my mind over stuff that I don't have control over, then that's my problem. So I'm trying not to worry about the things that I don't have control over. There's a lot that a writer doesn't have control over. I have control over writing the book, and then a little bit of stuff beyond that. But I don't have control over the huge, large picture of everything.
Can you tell us if you're working on anything now and what it is? I know we're reading She's Gone Next, but that'll be next year. Is there anything else to look forward to? We have.
I think it's, I think it's really embarrassing when writers shamelessly promote their new projects. Okay. I think that's awful when writers do that. But this book just came out on November 1st. She's Gone. This is a young adult suspense novel. If you find yourself in Barnes and Noble, it's the hot coffee, hot book deal right now. So you can get it for $5 if you wander into the Barnes and Noble cafe, or online you can buy a book and throw this into the cart for $5. So I mean, $5, like,
Why not? Well,
why not?
we're reading it next year,
It's-
so
I know,
you will have our support, our
It's
love.
it's worth at least $5.10. Let me tell you that.
Okay.
So,
I'll hold you to that.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Give us a
about
little
She's Gone?
teaser. Yeah.
Yeah, She's Gone. And like I said, it's my first young adult book. So the main character, Hunter, wakes up at the beginning of the book. He's in the hospital, and he is told that he and his girlfriend, Chloe, they've been dating for about a year, were in a car accident as they left homecoming dance. So one car accident out on a remote road. He cannot remember the accident. He has no memory of the night of homecoming or anything that happened. And they tell him in the hospital, oh, by the way, Chloe is gone from the scene of the accident. Her purse, her phone, her shoes, and a little bit of her blood are in the car, but she's gone. And you were just like wandering on the side of the road with a head injury, and he doesn't remember anything. So naturally who's the number one suspect? If your girlfriend disappears, it's boyfriend.
From your car.
Exactly. And he also finds out, he doesn't remember it, but he finds out that he and Chloe were arguing at the dance, and he doesn't know why they were arguing. So the whole town turns against him, and he has to try to figure out, did he do something that he can't remember? Or is someone else in town responsible for Chloe's disappearance? And since Chloe disappeared, where is she and why? And that's what the book is about. So that's out now. That just came out. Then next year, I'll have another adult book out from Berkeley called Try Not to Breathe, which will be out at the end of June. And that's about the two main characters are sisters, half sisters, One of them is a former police officer, and one of them is a college student. And at the beginning of the book, the younger sister, who's the college student, runs away, leaves college, drops out of college, and cuts off contact with her family. And so the family asks the older sister, Avery, who's a former police officer, to try to go find her and to find out why she's run away. So Avery follows her younger sister, Anna, to a remote place in the state, and they both learn a bunch of stuff about their family that they did not know, dark secrets about their family. So it's about the sibling relationship, that because Anna is the product of Avery's dad's second marriage, there are complicated feelings between the sisters. And the older sister kind of blames the younger sister for the breakup of the first marriage, even though, of course, she didn't have anything to do with it. So it gets into the family dynamic and the deep, dark, buried secret and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be out in June. And then the next, I've also written another young adult book, which should be out a year from now. And it's called The Midnight Driving Club. And it takes place in a really wealthy community where the parents have all gotten together and decided that they don't want the children, the high school students in their community, driving until they finish school. They want them focused on school. They're all high achievers. They know that kids have died in car accidents before, being careless and reckless. So no one in the community is allowed to drive under the age of 18. And the main character is just trying to get through school and get out and get a scholarship and go to college. But a new kid shows up at the school, and spoiler alert,
He drives.
he wants to drive, and he wants to start the Midnight Driving Club, where the kids sneak out of the house and drive at night. And spoiler alert, when kids start driving cars, and the kid who wants to start the driving club is obsessed with like classic 70s cars, right? And I don't know, I'm probably older than all of you, but I was a child in the 70s when, we didn't have, fancy things like seat belts and stuff like that and airbags. So you've got a bunch of high school kids sneaking out of the house, driving old cars and listening to 70s music and trying to recreate something that they have not been allowed to experience. And, you can just imagine how that turns out.
I was going to say, you've been busy.
I have. I think I need to get a dog to distract me.
You do. I
or
highly
hobby.
recommend it.
I need a hobby or something to get me out of the house a little more.
But we've got a lot to enjoy and look forward to reading from you. So that's
Let's
exciting.
hope so. Yeah.
Do you ever do ARCs with book clubs? And would you be up for it?
I have for my adult, for my adult books, I guess they've just cut back on the number of ARCs that they print and that we get. It's a lot of electronic ARCs now.
Yeah.
So I used to get, like, sometimes with my adult books, I just get like a massive box of ARCs, and they've really cut that back. The only way I think it could happen is if you wanted to do it, I would have to ask and say, like, just get me some for this book club. And then, I'd have to beg, or you'd have to beg.
I was going to say,
that-
I'm a good beggar. We're
you
we're doing an ARC right now with Wendy Walker, which is lovely. I'm not above begging, David. I will let
See,
you
that's
know.
big, Wendy
I'm the
Walker.
best beggar. So she sent us her book, which is really, really exciting physically. So we have that, and we're doing that in a few weeks. We did one with Grady. So How to Sell Your Haunted House.
I can't
We just
compete
did
with those
his.
people.
I'm like,
We would have to beg my publicist, and then you have a chance. You have a chance.
I'm a
Yeah.
good beggar.
Yeah. He's not going to listen to me he's not as likely to listen to me as he is to listen to an actual reader. So you would have to do a lot of the begging, or maybe
Okay.
get the dog. I saw the dog early.
I was gonna say,
beg?
yep, Jesse's
Maybe
dog.
somebody
I
can
have
help.
Annabelle. Annabelle's
Okay.
my dog. She's a really great beggar. She gets everything she wants.
It might be harder to say no to a dog who's the
Yeah.
mascot of a book club to beg than
I like that. This is very clever.
I would be the lowest person on the totem pole, behind the dog and the book club members and the librarians and all that. I would be way behind them.
Okay. I like it. I
We
was
can
gonna say
try.
I have no problem letting
We're all
Annabelle be my
animals.
beggar. We
Okay.
all are animal lovers here.
We've got the
So
dogs, we've got the cats, we've got
yeah,
bunnies, we've got
Heather's
birds. We're gonna throw them all
Okay.
at them.
you
Send them on, put them on an ark and send them to New York, and you might get a result. Yes.
whatever it takes. So why the shift to young adult? That's interesting. Because you said She's Gone is your first young adult. So just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it really just happened because I wanted to write more. I wanted to write something that was slightly different than my adult books. So She's Gone is still a suspense novel. It's just that the main character is 17. And I had come up with an idea for an adult book a few years ago that had two timelines, one where the main character was about 30 and one when he was in high school. And I realized that the timeline in high school, which was all in the past, was much more interesting than what the person was doing in the present when he was an adult. So I thought, and I just did it not thinking that the book would get published, not sure that I would even be able to finish the book. I just thought I would try to do this and see what happened. And so when I started writing She's Gone, which was not called She's Gone then, I really just found myself enjoying doing it, and I found the story really coming alive. And so there's just then the book ended up getting finished. So I've just found that writing from the perspective of a young adult, as opposed to an adult, allows me to just tap into some different things that I don't always get to do with an adult protagonist. And so like in the Midnight Driving Club, for instance, that's coming out, that would be out next year, I based the main character's relationship with his parents and his parents' marriage somewhat on my own parents. And so like I was just tapping into a different aspect of my brain and different emotions and different memories that I hadn't fully explored in other books. And it's been so long since I've been a teenager that maybe I just have a different perspective on that time in my life now. And so it's just allowing me to get into some interesting things that I hadn't thought I would always be able to get into. So it's been a lot of fun to do that. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to do one adult and one adult book each year for the next couple of years. So it's interesting.
Nice. What was She's Gone called? You said it wasn't originally called She's Gone.
It was originally called There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. And if you're fans of 80s music, or if you were a depressed teenager in the 80s, as I was, you listen to the Smiths album, The Queen Is Dead, which had a song called There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. And that song is about, in a very Smiths way, it's about a car accident. And so the book has the car accident in it. And in the book, there's a TikTok club in the high school, and some of the kids in the TikTok club make a video mocking the car accident, and they use the Smith song in that. And Hunter, the main character's parents, his dad turns on the satellite radio, and that song plays. And Hunter is like, what is this music? This guy, this weird singer singing about a car accident. So it was originally called that because I thought it was a really romantic title, that Hunter is looking for his girlfriend and there is a light that never goes out, his quest to find Chloe and find out what happened to her. But they didn't like that. So they changed the title to It's Always the Boyfriend. That was actually the title for a while, which I didn't think was a great title. And then one day they sent me an email, and there was an image of this, and I thought, oh, how strange. They have another author named David Bell who's written a book called She's Gone. I thought maybe they're sending this to me because there's another author named David Bell. I've never heard of this book, She's Gone. And I was like, oh, what is this book, She's Gone? And they said, oh, that's your book. It's called She's Gone. And that's the cover.
Oh, no.
And it's a really nice cover. I do really like the cover, and I do like the title that they picked. So it all worked out well. And she's gone as a great title for the book because Chloe is missing and all that. But anyway, the original title was There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. And that song is still mentioned in the book because the kids make the TikTok video and it comes on the radio when Hunter is driving in the car with his dad. So anyway, it's there.
So it's still landed in the book, though it didn't end up as the title. It's always interesting to hear, as a book is developed and published, the things that change or are cut, and the title changes and all of that.
Yeah, they Kill All Your Darlings. When I wrote the book was called The Manuscript because it was about the missing manuscript. And honestly, that's kind of a boring title. So when they wanted a new title for it, and Kill All Your Darlings was just the perfect title because of that famous writing advice about kill all your darlings, and because there's murder in the book. So that ended up being a great title for that book. And they did a great job with the cover. I love the cover of that book too.
Do you ever have any contribution when it's being designed, the book covers? Or do you often get emails that say, here's your book?
They always ask for my input on the cover. When they're designing the cover, they say, hey, do you have any ideas for what the cover could look like or images? And so with Kill All Your Darlings, I probably had them, they probably incorporated the largest number of my ideas, because I said that I like the idea of having, there's the bell tower on the campus. So I like the idea of having the bell tower. And I mentioned the pages flying around. If you've ever seen the movie Wonder Boys, the Michael Douglas movie, which is about a writer who's been writing like a book for years and years and years. And it's a Michael Chabon book. They made it into a movie with Michael Douglas. There's a part at the end of the book when the writer is like carrying around his 1,000-page book, and the pages go flying down the street, and like people are collecting the pages of the book. So I thought the idea of like the manuscript pages flying around was a good idea. And then naturally to put a young woman on the cover. So I did have that input, and they actually showed me 2 versions of the cover, which were both really good. But the one that I picked was even better. So they incorporated the bell tower, just that the bell tower was inverted to say upside down, to say like something weird is going on here. And they had the pages flying around. So I had that input on it, but there are other covers where most of the time I offer some ideas, and then they just do, they just come up with something. And I'm lucky if sometimes they'll give me a choice. The finalists that came out over the summer, available now wherever fine books are sold. Again, they gave me 2 options, and I picked the one that I liked the best, and they were both good options. I've been really lucky with my covers that I've liked all but one of them, so I'm fortunate.
I think that's fun to dive into and to learn. I'm a designer. I'm a graphic designer. I do it for
okay.
the government. And so I'm like, that always appeals to me. I'm like, I love to read, but I also love the way things are designed and named. And so it's
Well,
fun to
yeah,
learn.
I'm sure the government wants a lot of creativity in their.
No comment, because this is being recorded.
No, but I mean, we are told, of course, from when we're little kids, don't judge a book by its cover, but the cover there's so many books that the cover and the title can do a lot of work to get people interested in a book. If you walk into
especially
a
if it's a
bookstore,
new author, somebody you haven't explored before.
well, I mean, if you go into a bookstore or you look online and you just see like, book after book after book and cover after cover after cover, your eye's going to go to something, and if there's a boring cover or a cover that doesn't capture what the book is really about, you might pass on that book. That's just human nature. That's what we do.
Well, I also choose covers too. Like if I'm going to have like a paper book or a hardback, like a tangible book that I'm carrying around, I don't necessarily like want people to see like what's on the cover, depending on what it is. Like I have a very heavy job, and I am also in grad school, so I'm reading a lot of academic stuff all the time. So my like guilty pleasure is to read like cozy rom-coms, but I'm not going to carry a book around with a guy and a girl like in embrace. you know, and rom-com, like they figured that out. And so now the covers of the books are like these little like cartoonish, like two people looking at each other, but it's not like, it doesn't look
Mhm.
like a sex book. It just looks like, you know, like a nice like book that you're not going to be embarrassed about carrying around. And so I think it's interesting how we see trends of how book covers are done based on what people are going to carry around with them.
Yeah, and like if the book had a, a giant bloody knife on it or something, you might not want to carry that everywhere because
Yeah.
people who don't read or who make assumptions about what is in books, might think something, right? Or if you like go see, like, if I carried a book, my mom is 90. If I walked, if I brought a book in that had like a giant bloody knife on it, she would inevitably make some comment about it, right? Just like she made comments about stuff I read when I was 15. So yeah, I mean, you want to carry around a book that
Yeah, the people aren't going to look at you sideways. Like if you're like traveling, I love to pick up books when I'm going to get on a plane because I read very fast. I can read a book through the plane ride, especially when I go back home to Atlanta. And yeah, I'm not going to pick a book that has like scary murder on it or, you know, so I don't want the person sitting next to me to be like, what the heck am I sitting next to?
See, you're not, but I would. That's the problem. I would
Right,
definitely,
same.
they know. I'm like, I would pick up that book and that's what I would be reading on the airplane and be like, please don't judge me.
Well, the thing is that there are certain genres where the hardcore readers don't, like, say horror, for instance. Like if you're a hardcore, you really like to read horror, you're not going to be put off by like a bloody knife or a skull or something like that, right? But if you're trying to appeal to people who are not the hardcore audience and you want more people to read it, then if you
Yeah.
can still get the hardcore people to read it, but you can also maybe expand the readership by giving a cover that is not, you've already got those people.
Yeah, they're in, they know who you
The
are.
bloody skull people are going to read that no matter what, but maybe you can draw in some people who might just be curious about it.
You could pick up a Jessie, basically.
Exactly. So yeah, so
You got me, but you're gonna also get Jessie.
Right. So anyway, it's interesting to think about because readers want to know what they're getting. So they do look at the cover and say, oh, that looks like my kind of book, right? But then writers and publishers want as many people as possible to read the book. So you try to appeal to a lot of different people. But then anyway, it's all a complicated thing to think about. And it is interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, and like there's Kindle now. So like I read from my Kindle because I move around a lot. So yeah, if a book has like the bloody murder face on it or whatever, that's going to be a Kindle pick. It's not going to be like a tangible, but I like having my tangible books too. So.
And now you have to think about, it used to just be like if the book was in the bookstore, it was this big, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so many people order books online or search for books online that you have to know what the cover is going to look like on somebody's phone, right? So like there's certain, like if you have
legibility from mobile, yeah, absolutely.
Right, if you have really small type, that's not going to show up necessarily for somebody who's looking on their phone. So you want to book a cover that's going to look good on the phone. But then like if you go into a place like Target, and you have all these books there, what color is going to catch your eye, and women read more than men. So like, they're going to think about like, what color is going to catch the Target shopper's eye, right? And anyway, it's all like trying to figure out how to get people interested in something.
I was gonna say it's got its own psychology behind it.
It does.
Do we have anything else, guys? This has been awesome. You're so much fun. Sorry we got heavy, but thanks for getting heavy with us on a Sunday.
It's okay. Like I said, I appreciate people talking about the thing that matters in the book, right? More than just saying like, oh, it's,
we were surprised by who done it, basically.
It's just a who done it, and could you guess the murderer? And I understand those things are interesting too. But I think that a suspense book or any book can be also about a serious issue in addition to entertaining you and making you wonder who the killer is and all that stuff. So hopefully there could be a lot going on.
I appreciate when it's got something heavier that it's tackling also, and it's not just the story. I think that adds a lot to it.
Sure.
Anything else, guys? This was awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to coming back to discuss She's Gone. By the time we're discussing She's Gone, I won't remember anything about She's Gone.
We'll jog your memory.
You can refresh my memory, yes, and maybe there's a serious issue to discuss in She's Gone too. You'll just have to read it and find out.
We're looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Yes,
You
thank
too.
you.
David.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.